Welcome to the SCPI Week 3 Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Jersey Mike's, Connor Morissette, Keith the Molder. Keith, we were both at the game of the week last week, in my opinion. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I should take that back. Alex Scar was at the game of the week, Fairfax, Westchester. But we were at a game that was a close second, and that was when El Camino Real upset Taft. We did the podcast right after that game, and here we are now on Tuesday. And that was still a game that sticks out in my mind. Just a couple takeaways from that one.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great game through and through. I mean, we saw the JV game go almost into overtime right there. So certainly two big rivals from that Northern League. That said, I mean, ECR, they came out with a lot more firepower than I expected. Ed Egan, of course, one of their premier players, and just their ability to hit the three ball. I think we saw a lot of threes made, and then we saw a lot of turnovers and missed shots from Taft that really did them in, even though they had the home court advantage.
Yeah, that was a great West Valley League showdown, and there's going to be another one this week. Taft hosts Birmingham, and we'll pick that game in a little bit. But let's get into the top 10. At 10, Washington Prep. So last week they beat King Drew. They also beat Carson. They're undefeated in the Marine League. They take on Narbonne Wednesday. Narbonne, who is in our top 10 as well, a little higher up. That's going to be one of the games of the year in the Marine League because the winner will have the inside track to finishing in first place. But I think right now most people expect Narbonne to win that game, and Washington Prep's the 2. But the Generals have a chance to really stake a claim in that Marine League and show that they're the best team.
Right, and talking, in football season, there was some rumblings that there's going to be some transfers in Narbonne. They have a lot of size. That's their key, is their ability to, pound it down low. Obviously not the same size as maybe a Westchester has, but certainly a lot of big guys on their squad. That said, looking at George Washington Prep, they had a close loss at Fremont. Fremont, one of the better teams in the city section, 66-62. That was a close loss, so they can compete. I just got to wonder if they're going to be able to compete throughout league play.
There you go. You mentioned Fremont. They're number 9 because they beat Washington Prep, like you just said. So the question with this team, in my opinion, is I think Crenshaw, they're the number 1 seed, or the number 1 team in the Coliseum League, but who's number 2? Is it Fremont or is it View Park? And now that we're into league play, we'll kind of figure that out. But a nice win for them over Washington Prep.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you can go into a different league within the city section and get a win, that's absolutely huge. We saw it with football as well. But yeah, I love what I'm seeing from Fremont.
At 8 University, so tough week for them last week. They ended up doing well, 3-2, but they played some heavy hitters. They lost to Fairfax, lost to Westchester, but they beat Crossroads, Sharif O'Neal's team. They beat Hamilton, which isn't a very good team, and they beat Scher in a tournament, Southern Section School. So really for them, a 3-2 week. I don't think they could have asked to have done much better. Dyson Hughes for them is a great player. David Cheatham is another great player for them. But my question is, they have 5 reliable starters. I have some questions about their bench, and I have some questions about their lack of size. That's an issue. They're just not that big.
That is true. I mean, Hughes, he can hit the three ball all day long, but if you don't have defense, and especially come playoff time, especially when there's a lot of games with a lot of fouls, if, say Hughes fouls out, who do they have to come up off the bench and try and step up? That's a huge question for them. That said, I mean, being able to beat Crossroads, that's a huge win for them, a great Southern Section team. And Sharif O'Neal, he's the real deal. So the fact that they were able to get a win over them, I mean, just really a testament to how underrated this squad can be.
Yeah, quick takeaway, I've only seen Crossroads once, but in that game against University, just my opinion, it looked like Sharif O'Neal and then a huge drop-off. They had one guy who took a lot of shots, who I think was obviously the shooter on the team. They just didn't go down, so maybe in other games he's been better. But to me, it looks like Sharif O'Neal and then a big drop-off, whereas with the University, it's 5 very good players. At 7, Taft. They fall all the way from number 3 to number 7. So last week they beat Coronado. They beat Granada in a close game that I was at, but they lost to El Camino Real, and that was a surprise to a lot of people. Elko hadn't beat them in a few years. They play Birmingham Friday, so that's going to be a huge game for them, ability for them to get back on track. My X factor is Makani Whiteside for them, and he didn't have the best game against El Camino Real, and I think that's had a little bit to do with why they lost. Obviously, Eddie Egan for Elko did really well, but down the stretch against Granada Hills, Whiteside was great, and Granada Hills was winning with about 7 minutes to go in that game. They were up by 1. That was a very tightly contested game. I have to give Taft credit beating Granada Hills on the road, but I think a lot of people expect a little bit more of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about Whiteside, certainly he wasn't potent from 3. Usually you're looking for a shooting guard like him, to be able to hit those outside shots. But his fadeaway mid-range jumper is actually very lethal. What he does, he kind of does like a hesitation pullback, and he'll be able to hit it from about maybe 8 or 10 feet. Was really deadly against ECR. That said, that Taft team, talk about Ki Clark, University of Virginia, really hasn't played up to his potential per se. He's able to get to the basket early, but kind of inconsistent shooting from deep. You just got to look at that whole team overall. They don't have a lot of size per se, so I think that's going against Birmingham. I think that could be a detriment to that game.
Yeah, I didn't mention Kihei Clark. He didn't shoot the ball too well against Granada, but did the little things well, and that's what he's known for. 6, Crenshaw. They beat Fremont and View Park, 2 pretty good wins for him last week, but they lost to Narbonne. The question with them, I think right now they're kind of on the bubble. Are they an open team? Are they not? And right now it looks like they are. I think they're 18-6 on the year, so a very strong record. But in the Coliseum League, they don't really have too many more chances to kind of prove themselves. They've played some tough competition in the non-league, and they came up just short against Narbonne, which was an opportunity for them to pad the resume a little bit, but I still look at them and I think open division.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe that 8th seed they're going to try and get, but you're right. In league play, they don't really have that strong of a league, so I think if they're able to beat some of these better teams in league play, I think that they should really kind of separate themselves from the rest of the pack.
Number 5, Narbonne. They beat Crenshaw, as I mentioned, and Gardena last week. 2 more good wins. Freshman Zion Sutton had 21 points in that game against Crenshaw. Kendall Fry, the top player for Narbonne, had 19. And I think with them, solid open division team. They were the number 5 seed kind of before the season started. Everyone penciled them in at number 5, and that's where we have them right now. I think they're living up to the expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. They got great guard play. As I mentioned, big guys up front should be able to really carry them into the postseason. Of course, Wednesday's game, that'll be huge for them if they can win out in the Coliseum League. And a point I want to make about Narbonne as well as kind of Crenshaw is, some of these leagues are not as talented per se, but if you look at their league play, it's about how they win. It's about how many points they score. So if they're able to put up, big numbers on some of these other teams, win by double-digit leads, I think they'll show that they're open division ready.
Number 4, El Camino Real, led by Eddie Egan. Statement win for them against Taft last week. They also beat Cleveland and Rialto in a tournament. Egan, 27 points against Rialto, 21 against Taft. He's a warrior, and we saw him in person. I think ECR is going to go as far as he takes him.
The guy is just an absolute freak athletically. He's not necessarily the biggest guy, 6'3", maybe 6'4", but he's certainly lengthy.
Did you see the dunk he threw down, though?
Oh, man. It was good.
Yeah.
It was good.
That was incredible. And that wasn't even against Taft. It must have been against Cleveland, I'd imagine, but I saw that on Twitter, and I was like, is that the same guy? Because we interviewed him for the show, and we said, hey, want to dunk one for us? And he said, I'm not warmed up, so I thought, okay, maybe he's like a Steph Curry dunk once in a blue moon. He threw the ball down.
Right.
That was crazy.
He's got mad hops, and his ability also on the defensive end. He blocks shots. He's really kind of a two-way player. He can really take them far, I see him, and he can also hit the 3. So he's got everything. It's just about the rest of this ECR team to make sure to be good, defensively, to carry them when maybe Egan's not having a shot down. I think they can go really far, especially if they win over Taft. They have a game coming up.
Number 3, Birmingham. They beat Granada and Chatsworth by double digits last week. The story with them, it's the transfer. Christian Coloco, 6'11" center, just fantastic addition for them. I think he's the best big man. I don't want to say in the city because Westchester has some great big players, and so does Fairfax. But, he's right there. Devonair Detrieve is the highest-rated recruit per ESPN in the city section, so, that obviously helps. So the note I have for them, Detrieve and Coloco, they just have to keep developing chemistry and keep playing games. Because remember, it's only been like 4 games for Coloco because he had to sit out because he was a transfer. So for them to really compete with the Westchesters and the Fairfaxes and repeat as a city section champion, I think they just need to get more games down, and they'll have that opportunity in the West Valley League before the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely, and they've already kind of shown their muscles as of late. Some big double-digit wins. As we said, it's about how you win, not just getting those W's. But obviously, having a 7-footer like that, it really sets you apart from some of these other teams, especially going into playoff time when you have a guy that you can just throw the ball to down low and make sure that he's going to get consistent buckets. But it's just kind of like football as well. When you have a transfer, doesn't really know the offense, doesn't really know the defense as well as he should. So I think that once they're able to get in a rhythm, they're in league play now. Once you see those wins starting to roll off their play, I think they should be a really good team.
They have Taft Friday, that's a huge one. And they play El Camino Real this week as well, so a big test for them. Fairfax is number 2, so they lost to Westchester last week and Sierra Canyon, 2 of the best teams in the country, so can't really fault them for that. They beat University. Jamal Hartwell had 19 points in the loss against Westchester. Ethan Anderson had 18 points. He was defended very well by Zelly Hudson, who we'll get to in a little bit. But right now it looks like Westchester's the class of the city section, and then right below them is Fairfax.
Yeah, Fairfax, their guards are just so talented. They play their roles well. That's what I really like about them. But even defensively, their ability to kind of come in and make sure to support one another, the help defense has really been there. At least looking at their film. But that said, working against these taller teams, you got Kirk Smith, the guy that I've mentioned on the podcast before. Great talent, really big kid. But otherwise, I think that they need some of their external players to kind of step up against these bigger sized teams because Westchester, we just saw them. They just pounded the ball down low. You watched the highlights. Alex Carr was there at that game last week. So if they can keep it close with Westchester, then I think they should really give them trouble in the playoffs.
Absolutely. And Westchester, they're the team at number 1. Last week they beat University. They beat Fairfax. Kalen Allen had 24 points against Fairfax. Ellie Hudson played tenacious defense against Ethan Anderson in that game. And Anderson still had 18 points, so to his credit, he did well. But Hudson, the talk after that game was that he played fantastic defense. And Bishop Montgomery awaits them Saturday.
Yes.
And remember, when these two teams played earlier in the year, Westchester lost by just a point. So they could be Bishop Montgomery's biggest threat in Southern California, which is crazy to say when you have teams like Eddie Wanda in Sierra Canyon. But Westchester, they're that good. And they have a chance against Bishop Montgomery. Again, Westchester's one of the best in the nation, but Bishop Montgomery, they might be a little bit better.
Yeah, and Bishop Montgomery, mind you, a former California State champion. They have a lot of guys, of course, going D1. We saw a lot of them graduate. Now they're playing D1 schools, and they've just really continued this whole excellence in basketball. And I think that Westchester, again, if they can compete once again, maybe not even get the win, but keep it close, 1 point, that's, people think that a loss is so detrimental to your season, but in reality, a good loss is probably the best thing you can get than a 20-point loss, because at least you have something to take away from it, that we can compete with these top teams, and hopefully they'll be able to compete this Saturday. But I'm mainly looking forward to how they compete with Fairfax and the rest of that league, after Saturday's game.
So there's your top 10: Washington Prep 10, Fremont 9, University 8. Taft at 7, 6 Crenshaw, 5 Narbonne, 4 El Camino Real, 3 Birmingham, 2 Fairfax, and 1 Westchester. Game balls. Who were the top players in the LA City section this week? Keith, we'll get you started. I know you really like the Narbonne player, and that was a freshman for Narbonne who had a great game against Crenshaw.
Yeah, Zion Sutton, you get the game ball from me. Huge game, 21 points. For being a freshman, we've seen that, freshmen in college, Marvin Bagley from Sierra Canyon, by the way, they go off for points, but a freshman in high school being able to score like that for Narbonne, really, it's going to be clutch for them this year, but then, he still has 3 years left after this year, so it's going to be a big year for Narbonne, especially for that freshman.
I had Eddie Egan as my game ball player this week. I was really impressed with his warrior-like display against Taft, and then to see on Twitter that he went off in a tournament against Rialto and scored 27, 6 more than he had against Taft. That's even more impressive. And he had that huge dunk. So Eddie Egan, game ball this week, emerging as one of the best players in the section. Keep up the great work. Let's pick a couple games. Keith, we got 2 on the slate that I want to discuss. First is Narbonne at George Washington Prep.
I'm going to have to go with Narbonne. I think, talking about my game ball, that whole team is just so good, especially playing on the road. I don't think it's really fazed them thus far this year. So I think George Washington Prep, obviously a very good ball club. I think if they're able to beat Narbonne, I think that's going to show a lot about that George Washington Prep team. But as of right now, I'm going with the Bond.
Yeah, I have Narbonne as well. I think they're just a little bit too much for Washington Prep. Second game on the list, Birmingham at Taft. Who do you like there?
I'm going to go with Birmingham. I think that, we saw their record early on. People are saying, oh, wow, they have so many losses. Birmingham, are they the real deal? But I think with, Coloco, I think with that transfer, I think they're going to surprise some people. I think they're going to get the win. Obviously, playing at Taft, it's not exactly what you want, but I think for ECR, I don't even know if we even considered ECR to beat Taft in that game, and they came in and they won handily. So I think I see Birmingham.
Not so fast. I'm taking Taft, and I know might be sort of an interesting one after all we've talked about with them, how they've been a little bit disappointing. But Birmingham, with these transfers in the league, hasn't really been tested yet. And Taft, you were there, Keith. It's a hostile environment.
That's true.
And what I've noticed, I've seen Birmingham a couple times this year. They were up 20-2 against Granada, and then next thing you know, Granada was down just 7, then made it a ball game. Sometimes Birmingham lets the opposition get back into games. So I could see them starting fast against Taft. Obviously, Coloco is going to be a tough cover, and Devenir Detrieve is the best guard in the city section, in my opinion. But I don't know. I think Kihei Clark and the boys are going to pull one from out of nowhere because they're angry. They lost to El Camino Real. They barely scraped by Granada. People thought that they were the third best team in the city section, and they don't look like it at all right now. I think Derek Taylor coaches them up this week, and they get a win against Birmingham. 2 to 3 point win. I think it's going to be a really tight game the whole way.
Yeah, absolutely. Should be a great one. And obviously, we'll see after that win, maybe some moving up in the rankings, moving down. Needless to say, I say Birmingham, but who knows? We'll see next week.
Hey, that's why they play the game, as they say. This has been the SCPI Week 3 Basketball Podcast presented by Jersey Mike's. For Keith the Mulder, I am Connor Morissette. If you see us at a game, feel free to stop by and say hello. We'll be back at USC next week to do the Week 4 podcast, so we'll see you then.